The Los Angeles Dodgers walked off in the 11th inning and the celebration lasted approximately 30 seconds. Because what happened next in that locker room erased every moment of joy that walk-off hit produced and replaced it with something that nobody inside that organization wanted to be dealing with in the immediate aftermath of an 11-inning victory. Rushing and Scott. A brawl. In the locker room. In front of teammates who had just finished competing for over 3 hours in one of the most emotionally exhausting games of the entire season. Scott had given up 3 runs on the mound that nearly cost the Dodgers everything. And the moment the game ended and that locker room door closed behind them, the tension that had been building throughout those 11 innings exploded into a confrontation that has now sent shockwaves through every corner of this organization. Scott has been demoted to the minor leagues. Immediately. Without discussion. Without a grace period. The decision was made and executed with the kind of decisive speed that tells you the front office had been watching Scott's situation carefully long before last night's 3 runs made the decision unavoidable. And now Rushing has stepped forward and revealed exactly what caused the altercation. But the detail that has captured the baseball world's attention above everything else is not the brawl, and it is not the demotion. It is the words that Shohei Ohtani spoke to Rushing in the dugout during the game. Words that have become a hot topic across the entire sport. And words that reveal something extraordinary about the kind of leader Ohtani has become inside this clubhouse. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that a locker room brawl had erupted between Rushing and Scott immediately after the walk-off victory in the 11th inning? The timing of it is what makes this situation so genuinely complex to process. A walk-off hit in extra innings is one of the most emotionally intense moments in baseball. The players who are in that dugout and on that field when the winning run crosses the plate are experiencing a surge of collective emotion that is difficult to describe to anyone who has never been part of it. And then to have that emotion, that relief, that joy, that release of accumulated tension from 11 innings of competition, interrupted almost immediately by a locker room confrontation between 2 teammates puts every person in that building in an impossible emotional position. You are trying to celebrate. You are trying to process what just happened on the field. And instead you are watching 2 of your teammates go after each other in the room where you are all supposed to be coming together in the aftermath of a hard-earned win. Let's talk about Scott specifically, and what the 3 runs he gave up actually represented in the context of that 11-inning game. Because 3 runs from a relief pitcher is not just a statistical entry. In a game that close, in a game that tight, 3 runs represent the difference between a comfortable victory and an extra inning ordeal that tests every player on the roster. The Dodgers had to dig themselves out of a hole that Scott created. They had to extend their bullpen further than they wanted to. They had to ask position players to compete at maximum intensity for longer than the original game plan required. And they had to do all of that because of pitches that Scott threw that he should not have thrown in that situation against that lineup. By the time the walk-off hit ended the game, the emotional accounting of everything that Scott's 3 runs had cost this team was very much on the minds of every player who had to live through those extra innings. From Rushing's perspective, what was the specific trigger that turned accumulated frustration into an actual physical confrontation in that locker room? This is the question that Rushing has now answered directly by revealing the cause of the altercation. And what he revealed tells a story that is more complicated and more human than the simple narrative of a player losing his temper in the heat of the moment after a stressful game. Rushing was not just reacting to what happened on the field last night. He was reacting to a pattern. To something that had been building between him and Scott over a period of time that goes back further than this single game. The 3 runs were the catalyst, but they were not the only cause. What Scott said or did in that locker room in the immediate aftermath of the game crossed a line that Rushing had been approaching for longer than last night alone. And understanding that context is essential for understanding why the confrontation happened the way it did, and with the intensity that it did. Now let's discuss the demotion, because the speed of that decision tells you everything about how this organization is processing what happened. Scott was demoted to the minor leagues immediately. Not the next morning after organizational deliberation. Not at the end of the series after the coaching staff had time to evaluate options. Immediately. That kind of instant organizational response to a locker room incident of this nature is extraordinarily rare. It tells you that the front office was already positioned to make this move before the brawl gave them additional reason to execute it. The 3 runs Scott gave up were likely the final confirmation of a performance pattern that the Dodgers had been evaluating with increasing concern for several outings. The locker room incident accelerated a timeline that was already moving in this direction. But make no mistake about the message the organization sent with the speed of this demotion. That behavior inside this clubhouse will not be tolerated, and that performance at this level will not be accepted without immediate consequences. What does Scott's demotion tell us about the standards this organization holds its players to, and about how the front office responds when those standards are not being met? The Dodgers have built their organizational culture around a very specific set of expectations that apply to every player on the roster regardless of contract status or previous performance history. Those expectations cover what happens on the field. They cover how players conduct themselves in the dugout and the locker room. And they cover how players handle the inevitable moments of failure that every competitor faces over the course of a long professional season. When Scott gave up 3 runs and then conducted himself in the locker room in a way that triggered a confrontation with a teammate, he failed to meet those expectations on multiple levels simultaneously. The organization's immediate response was a statement about what those expectations mean in practice. The Ohtani dimension of this story is the part that the baseball world cannot stop talking about. Because the words he spoke to Rushing in the dugout during the game have become a genuine hot topic, and for good reason. Ohtani does not typically insert his voice into the competitive and emotional dynamics of his teammates in public or visible ways. He leads by example. He leads through his preparation and his performance and his professionalism. When he speaks directly to a teammate in a visible and meaningful way during a game, it carries a significance that goes far beyond the words themselves. Whatever Ohtani said to Rushing in that dugout was something that people on both sides of that dugout heard. And it was something that reflected his understanding of the situation on that field and his understanding of what Rushing was carrying emotionally through those 11 innings. The fact that those words have become a hot topic tells you that what Ohtani said resonated with everyone who heard them in a way that very few moments of in-game communication ever do. What specifically does it tell us about Ohtani's evolution as a leader inside the Dodgers organization that he chose that moment in that dugout to say what he said to Rushing? This is where the story transcends the immediate drama of the brawl and the demotion and reveals something genuinely profound about the human dynamics inside this team. Ohtani is not just the best player in baseball. He is increasingly the emotional center of this organization in a way that goes beyond his statistical contributions. His awareness of what was happening with Rushing during those 11 innings. His decision to address it directly and personally in the dugout rather than waiting for it to resolve itself. And the specific words he chose to use in that moment, words that have resonated so powerfully that the entire baseball world is talking about them. All of this tells you that Ohtani understands his role in this clubhouse at a level that even his most ardent admirers may have underestimated. The walk-off hit ended the game. The celebration lasted 30 seconds. The brawl happened. The demotion followed immediately. Rushing revealed the cause. And Ohtani's dugout words became a story that the baseball world cannot stop discussing. This is the full picture of what happened last night inside the Los Angeles Dodgers organization. And every single element of it reveals something important about where this team is, where it is going, and what kind of organization it is becoming under the quiet but extraordinary influence of the greatest player in baseball.